that's even more awesome. And cool. All right. Thanks everybody for joining another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross-Project Council meeting. Today's date is the 29th of September in our year 2020, the year that never ends. Cool, so we'll start with some announcements and then we'll hustle through the agenda and get on to some project review work. Announcements first, anything?
Couple things. So reminder, totally cool, AMP Fest is October 13th. So if you're interested in hearing the latest from the AMP project, encourage you to sign up for that. And related, the AMP TSC is going to do a AMA for the project at our next AMA, and that'll be on the 14th. Also, AMP related news, the nomination period for advisory council members is coming to a close this Friday. So if you're interested in getting involved in the project in a strategic capacity and want to find out more about that, go check out the blog on amp.dev or ping Toby or myself. Happy to tell you about that. We've got an upcoming board meeting this Friday. I believe they're going to aim to have a public board meeting as usual. And just a reminder to sign up for the projects at list.openjsf.org if you're interested in keeping in the loop on all of like the latest announcements and things like that from the foundation. That's all I know right now.
Cool. Anything from the board side? I know the meeting's coming up soon, so maybe it's been quiet, or maybe there's updates in the issues, but if there's anything anyone wants to call out now, feel free.
I don't have any updates, and I'm not aware of anything new to be brought to the board. There are votes on a couple things, but they seem to be progressing okay.
Cool. Cool. All right, great. So let's party then. Getting into the agenda, the first item is issue 651. This is clarify the license of the materials in this repo. Emily noticed this recently. There's been a little bit of chatter here. Emily, you want to get us up to speed on this?
Effectively, it's not really clear what license, if any, is assigned to the material that's in the CPC repo. It's probably MIT, but given the phrasing of the MIT license and given that we have some minor scripting, it's kind of dubious. My non-lawyerly thought is that we should be able to relicense everything as Creative Commons, and then at least have a license on it. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if there are any hoops that need to be jumped through here or thoughts or opinions, but that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Past discussion has, and Brian can clarify I'm getting it wrong, was that MIT is fine for a doc license, like for a repo that just has documentation in it.
That is correct.
All right.
But
and
my issue there is that it doesn't really clarify, because the MIT says that it's documentation of the software, and there is some very, very minor scripting for the markdown formatting and so on that you could theoretically consider to be the software, of which we clearly are not the documentation of, but sort of vice versa.
Did we just clarify this in the README? I mean, the whole point of having this licensed freely is so other people can use some of the governance work that we've produced as templates for whatever it is that they're doing. So just like clarifying this in the README, I think should be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think we even went to the legal team and said, what are the recommendations for repos that have, primarily documentation?
Yeah, that was in the very early days.
Yeah.
Let me see if I find that. I remember writing it, but I don't remember where it is.
So I think the minimum action here would be to do exactly that, just add a very short mention, for example, in the README to really make sure that we are explicitly saying that MIT applies to everything.
Okay.
I mean, I guess the only question on that would be, do we need to add that as part of the recommendation then to other teams as well if we think that's important? Because I think we've basically said to other teams and other projects, like, you can just use MIT, that's fine. If it needs some sort of clarification.
I mean, we had like very explicit advice from the legal side of thing. Oh, I think I might have jumped there. I apologize. We had very explicit legal advice from like the lawyers saying what to use where, and as long as like we're following that, I think we're probably fine. So maybe double checking against that and making sure we're doing, you know, what that says. And that came from Brian, so we can probably get that from him. But there was never, as far as I recall, there was never any note that like you need to be explicit when there's like a single line of code in this repo that it needs to be different. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
but
gonna see if I can dig
just
that
to
up.
be clear, so first of all, like in the IP policy, I can share it here. Well, in the guidance, it says clearly that both CC by and MIT acceptable for documentation.
Yeah.
I think my understanding is that there's actually no MIT license in the repository except one in the package .json. That's my understanding.
There is a license.md in the root file.
Oh, so
Yeah.
we're good. Yeah, so I think we should just
Yeah.
close this issue.
Okay. Does anybody want to link to anything for reference as a final comment and then close it, or you know, somehow just kind of wrap it up and say this is all fine? That would be great. Cool. Thank you, and thanks Emily for you know, bringing it up and making sure we're legit here. Cool. I'm going to hustle on. Should we have a lightweight mechanism to spin off ad hoc working groups? This is issue 649 that we had talked about in a meeting. Bi-weekly. Emily has a suggestion for like I think agenda meetings every other week and working sessions on the off week, which I'm also not necessarily opposed to. Anything we want to talk about on this one? Toby, you started it. I know it was out of our conversation, but any thoughts on this?
I apologize. I was writing notes for the previous issue.
Sorry. I think this is just basically, you know, like it says, a lightweight mechanism to spin off ad hoc CPC working groups. So we don't have to do all of the hoops and make it so burdensome when we do need to spin off, you know, whatever sort of meeting. This would probably be useful for a variety of groups.
Yeah, I was essentially just wondering if the foundation could provide us with sort of like a template and, you know, easy access to like a Zoom thing and like a doodle to organize this. I'm seeing Jory like wave hands.
Yeah, that's me. So I am curious how, like, because right now the way this occurs is functionally like we get together and we have a little chat and we decide, gosh, it would be sure great if we could get together outside of the CPC meeting in a very ad hoc way and talk further. So what happens from there is a person sends an email, which is not necessarily like the open, transparent way that we would ideally like to do. So is the problem you're looking to solve to make that more of a like open thing that is you know, systematized in a way versus like right now the way we do it, which is we all agree, yeah, let's go do that, and then we email each other and have the meeting.
I think it's two things. I think one thing is just to make it lighter weight for the person actually organizing this, and you know, probably at the expense of like foundation staff. So you know, that might be a fair point. But I think that the more important one, I mean, the one I was more concerned with is it feels like it's not clear to everybody what's happening, and that feels suboptimal / not really transparent. So like I want to avoid this idea of like a few people getting together to solve something was other people feeling like they're not part of it.
So one thing that I remember doing for some early ad hoc conversations before we started like the code of conduct working group and standards was opening an issue on the CPC repo for ad hoc meeting. And so I did this a couple of times where it was like ad hoc meeting. We'd like to have a meeting to talk about blah. Here's a doodle link in that issue. And, you know, and then it was on me or whoever, you know, to actually see who responded and then create a calendar invite for those who had responded to the doodle poll. We do have a foundation Zoom, a couple of Zoom accounts. So, I mean, like some of that stuff is easily, you know, you could use, but I don't know if that's super obvious to everybody.
I think we can like, you can just use the same standing webinar from the CPC meeting. Like we don't even like from that perspective, we don't even need to create anything new. I think like the transparency side, like Jory suggested, saying, hey, we should create an issue, paste in the Zoom link, and you know, description of the topic. The hard part is like doing a doodle and chasing that down.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt you, Michael. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I wonder about like an issue template that has a couple of these links in the issue template. You know, a doodle, kind of just like sort of a checklist here. Create a doodle. You know, if we had some tooling that could fire off a HackMD file, but that's not even that much of a hurdle. Jump over to there. You know, but maybe like some sort of checklist of these are the things that you should do as a meeting organizer, and perhaps. You know, here are a couple of things that you might lean on Foundation staff for. Maybe we have a generic Zoom link that is easy that we could put in a meeting issue and pretty much spin up for each meeting. But maybe, somebody would throw something on the calendar and send out invites, there's maybe a little bit of legwork there, but I think
the Zoom one, it's like just use the same Zoom link. Like I don't know of any reason to use anything else. So I don't think we need anything fancy on that front.
Sure, just like even knowing that is useful. I was not aware. Just saying,
right. Yeah. So I think Joe's idea of a template where you
great.
basically say create an issue, it could paste the Zoom link in. The remaining question for me is like how much trouble the organizer needs to go through in terms of organizing the time, right? Like, it's almost like that's where all the time in my experience is if like you want to do an ad hoc one, trying to find doodle and filling in slots, and then if people actually want an invite, you've got to send an invite. That's where the work ends up being.
Well, I mean, I think if we can just start with this already, like I love this issue template idea, start with this and then do it a couple of times and maybe we can find some other things to improve. That's a great start.
Perfect. Yep.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah. So if somebody wants to drop a comment in there, that's maybe a plan to move forward, and we can kind of capture in this issue some of the things that we think should be in a issue template. Then it's not too hard to throw an issue template together, and we can be off to the races.
One thing I'd recommend and request would be that if somebody would like to use the Zoom, please make sure that somebody adds it to the central calendar so we can manage any collisions. Yeah. That's really the one just thing is the only thing that bothers me.
And that sort of solves the calendaring problem too, doesn't it?
It just certainly does. As a matter of
fact. Like
yes, because
you want it in the calendar for transparency, and it also then avoids the conflicts with other meetings.
That's great. Yeah. Could we maybe have just a tag or something like this so that someone can automate this process? Just tag it was like ad hoc meeting or something like this. Let's have this discussion in the issue.
Yeah.
Have them send an email to operations. Yeah. That's still going to be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Which we can have in the issue template as well. Don't forget to fire this off once things are scheduled.
I guess, Brian, one question on the calendar. Who can actually add to the calendar?
See who's got access right now. So we just changed it within the past month or two so that non-linuxfoundation.org addresses are able to create events. So right now, people who can create events Let's see here. So it is so Robin, Rachel, Jory, Joe, and I guess anybody else who would need access to the public calendar.
I think like certainly I know I can create them for the node calendar.
Mhm.
We probably want to make that fairly broad so that, you know, again, when you say create your ad hoc meeting, anybody on the CPC could do that, right?
We could do that. The other thing to keep in mind here too is that once somebody creates an event on the calendar and adds you to it, you can then go add an arbitrary number of people to the calendar invite. So just as long as there's somebody who is able to create the initial event, anybody who's part of that event is able to expand the invite.
Yeah, I'm just like, if you have to go ask somebody else, that immediately is like they've got to be around. And so unless there's a reason not to just say, hey, if you want to have access to the calendar and we know who you are, sure, right?
Please correct me, but doesn't that Zoom meeting also need a host? That is,
yes,
one of some subset of people.
That's also, you know, on the node in the node project. Basically, anybody who ends up needing it, we have a process. We ask the admin. Generally, it's like I've done it quite a few times. I sent an email to the TSC and ComCom saying, "Hey, this person is going to be hosting meetings. I'd like to give them access. If nobody objects, we basically add them to the YouTube and ask Brian to add them, share the credentials."
It's probably easier if we just used a meeting instead of a webinar for this.
Yeah.
And then we can just set it to join before host. And I guess we can figure these out separately, but I think I can probably simplify the process for you even further.
All right.
Yeah, there doesn't need to be a lot of structure on this. Like we can get it kind of going and iterate from there.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, so move some of these thoughts to the issue and start to flesh out what would be good in a template. Great, thank you, Toby. And yeah, we'll iterate from there. Awesome. Cool. Good. The next item is avoid duplication of impact stage criteria, acceptance criteria. This is a pull request that Toby opened. Thank you for doing that. There's not a lot here. It's been open for a week. We've got a few reviews already approving. This isn't really necessarily governance, right? So is this good to go? Does anybody have anything they want to add or anything we need to talk about here? No? And if I'm not mistaken, it is good to go. So I will squash and merge.
Sounds good.
I do that. All right, so that is happening, and it is done. Great, thank you. We have another pull request. This is 647. This is ads growth plan template. This is in draft. We talked about this last time. We just want to, if I remember correctly, looking. Oh, okay. No, I'm mistaking this with a different issue. You want to give us an update on this, Toby? What we need to know?
Just give me a second. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're. I'm really calling on you a lot today, Toby. You're sitting at the front of the class.
Yeah, I am. I was early for this meeting. I'm never going to do that again. Yeah, no, I have to include Michael's suggestion in there. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have a bit more, either just thumbs up if people think that this is good and we can go with it, or a bit more discussion. I feel like it's a significant thing. I don't know. I'd like a bit more input before saying it's ready to land.
So should we pull it out of draft stage, or I guess people can review even in draft stage? I guess is the request for people to take a look at and comment some more.
I mean,
and
you're right. I can do this. I'm just going to mark it ready for review and see how people react.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
That's that.
All right, great. So everybody take a look, put your thoughts in there, and let's move it forward. Thanks for doing the work there, Toby. Cool. Anything else we want to talk about on that one? Or we'll just ask for people to check it out. Now, this next one was the one I was thinking of, pull request 643, also in draft. This one is adding AMP as a successful application example. And I think it's going to be in draft until Robin provides some additional ones that are already public but aren't linked from anywhere. Robin is at an appointment, so she couldn't make it, but I will maybe ping her and ask her about this. And once we get some other folks in there, some other project applications in there, we can make this not a draft and move it forward.
Yeah, if other folks here already have things they can link, that would be useful.
Yeah, please.
And just to clarify, again, to clarify, like the idea was not just this to be about AMP's application, but like it'd be a broader set. So that's why it's in draft.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is good, makes sense. All right, cool. Moving on to issue 635, simplify proposal process. We are still looking for a volunteer to work through making the process simpler and trimming back the stages perhaps and making things a little more clear. So again, if anybody wants to even get this started and then we can kind of work through a PR together, that would be awesome. I will refrain from trying to put anyone on the spot, but please, if you have time, that'd be awesome.
I must say that I've added a bunch of pull requests in draft mode recently, and that feels like a really lightweight way to get something started. So I truly recommend this. Like it feels like you just throw something out and tell everybody it's not ready.
Yeah. All right, cool. If I can, I'll try to take a look at it, but frankly, it's been a little bit crazy lately, so we'll see. Anybody step up. Moving on, the next one is issue 632, provide implementation guidance for DCO CLA. It's been around for a bit. I'm not even sure where we're at with this, so I'll defer to my friend Toby in front, or Brian, or anyone.
Going to be around for a little bit longer.
Yeah. I think we're waiting for Brian this time.
You are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool. No worries.
Haven't forgotten about it.
Yep. No worries. Great. Moving on. Next issue is pull request 547. Michael, this is the governance changes for Collab Network.
Yep. So votes underway, should land soon.
Beauty. And last but not least, the rest of the meeting. This is the develop annual review process for projects. So yeah, what we've got. Oh, nice. It's only 31 minutes past, so that the timing worked out well. Where are we, Toby and Chris, and how do we want to move forward with this next 25 minutes?
So that's a great question. There's a number of pull requests open. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we were up to last week.
One of the fundamental questions I remember was like, do we want to drop the like basically just go down to having 2 stages, which is at large and impact?
Yeah, so I actually created a pull request for this to have a conversation on this topic. I'm just trying to figure out what it is right now. Oh, it's the proposal to remove the growth stage, which is this one here. Yeah, and I answered these in the comments that Michael you made and Emily you made today in between two meetings. So the tone is a bit more terse than I would have wanted it to be. Rereading it now, I apologize. So essentially, I think, yeah, the goal of creating that pull request was just to show what it would roughly look like and see if we could gather sort of like agreement around this. And then as a second step, sort of like figure out the impact that doing that has on other things in that repository and maybe in others. I've checked the bylaws. It doesn't seem to have any impact on the bylaws, which is really good news. But outside of that, I haven't looked in this repository. And of course, I mean, you know, that like the whole point is to have a discussion about this.
So I think I missed the conversation where we proposed this idea. So what's the motivation for dropping the growth stage?
I think that the discussion, I'll give you my 2 cents description, was that some of the comments and suggestions were that like any project would want to have a growth plan potentially. And so it wasn't necessarily tied to being in a particular stage or necessarily even wanting to get to impact. And the way it was currently written was, you know, it seemed like a stepping stone. Like basically you're at large, then you move to growth, and then you move from growth to impact. And if it's that anybody could want a growth plan, and maybe an at-large project wanted a growth plan, but then just end with the end goal being at large, having it as a separate stage didn't make sense, and having it be something where any project could ask for a growth plan would make sense, I think is what, you know, then would you come up with there isn't something called growth, but then any project in any of the stages can actually get a growth plan.
I kind of even feel like the term growth is maybe a little bit off in terms of, I think, perhaps the thinking that's been developing around this. I think it's more about like a certain level of increased activity for a fixed time, perhaps. Like, you know, you could be an impact project or whatnot and be like, we want to do X or Y, and, you know, we want to kind of enter this quote unquote phase with support from the foundation and, you know, some activity to drive that goal. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm talking in such an abstract way that it might not.
It's kind of like asking for additional resources, and
Yeah.
you know, anybody can ask for some ad hoc help, I think is what Jory pointed out. But that having a way where you can say, I want a plan for growth development, you know, like I think Joe said, it's like, I want to do something special and I want extra help from the foundation to do that, was the way the thinking was kind of being discussed.
I think that like the problem that we're facing right now is that there's two fundamentally different patterns that are implemented as a single pattern. So like we have growth, we have impact. Impact is like measuring the state, or at least from that word, it's measuring the state of the project. So like Node is an impact project. I mean, this isn't the only reason, but like the optics of that are it is impactful in a way that is like deep and systemic in JavaScript. A lot of projects aren't going to get to that level. And then having growth, like putting projects in growth, the path there seems to be that it's like, from the word, it's you are growing to be impact, but then that is like different than how we have structured impact. And it seems like the meaning we actually have for growth is that like you are going to become an impact project, which I don't think is a reasonable thing for every project. And we don't have a space that is like that. We don't have a distinction between you're growing to, or you're like in the case of AMP, I think is actually a good example of they are, I think a good project that is in growth in terms of they have some checkboxes still to go before they hit impact, but like I think they meet impact pretty aggressively. But like something like, I don't know, like a project I make and gets 4 million downloads a month or something, that's not going to be an impact project in the same way. And so I think that we either need to add a stage or refine how we define the current stage. And I think that those are our options. And I think I think we should probably try to pick one of those and then go with that, and like start narrowing the scope of what we're talking about, because I feel like we've kind of been talking about the same thing a bit here for a while.
Am I understanding right, Tierney, that you're saying that there's we sort of like jumbled the state machine was like two different concepts?
Yeah. Yes, that's my perspective on it, and I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like.
I think that I would agree with that, Tierney, too.
I would almost throw in, I think might be 3, because like impact, we have, just to make it a little bit more complicated, like in impact, we have something in terms of like the impact to the overall ecosystem, but we also have requirements about sort of how open source, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word, but like, do you have contributors from multiple companies? Do you have a governance that's established? So there's also kind of reaching some level in terms of that level of, openness, or I don't know, whatever you want to call that, in addition to the impact that we have lumped in with impact itself.
It's interesting. I've even been thinking too about impact in terms of the impact that you as a project, bad term, but would have on the foundation and the work that we're doing and such as well.
Yeah, that's almost another dimension.
So when I brought this up, I mean, I was just talking about I want to get a growth plan, and I want,
So, yes, there's the context.
And I'm trying to pull us back, like,
yeah,
from let's tear it all down and start again, because that's what we're doing. And that's fine if that needs to happen, but that was not my intent. Okay? I wanted to talk about let's get these growth plans written up. Let's get timelines. Let's see, how do we get the projects to where they need to be, or where they want to be, and go from there. And work on, if we need to assign mentors or whatever, that's great too. But yeah, I don't know. We just keep drifting off into this. Let's tear down the stages and do it all again. And we did spend a considerable amount of time on these stages, and decided that they made sense at that time that we merged the foundations. So I don't know, just saying, right?
I guess the one thing I'd say on that is, like, we should not be afraid to iterate on this stuff. That has caused a lot of problems for, like, not the foundation necessarily in the past, but just in various projects that are now in the foundation, and like certain political structures and stuff like that. Like, I think we should probably be willing to address, like, I have not heard someone say, no, this isn't a problem, or no, this isn't a thing that we should talk about. Well, maybe Async talk about, but like, I haven't heard someone negate that at this point, which is probably a good indicator that it's something we should do. I also don't think that should, I think that should probably be a separate discussion from, or that it should be a separate discussion from what you're asking for, what you wanted to start with, Chris.
Yeah, agreed.
And just to be clear, I think we can do both sort of like in parallel.
Yeah.
And there is, I mean, I've opened a pull request like 647 that we talked about earlier on the roadmap itself, right? And building and having a template for this. If we want to add to that conversation, how do we handle mentorship for this? I think is a topic we should tackle. We could tackle right now, and like have the concrete discussion about for the projects that are in growth right now, to see what they want to do and organize that. I think we should have this conversation. It's a separate one, and I think it's a good conversation to have also. I'm tired. I'm sorry that only half made sense.
Nope,
No,
that made sense. Like basically you've got a nice start for the template there. And it working through that. So for example, like maybe working through that template with Chris in the context of Mocha, for example, would help, make it very tangible, and adding something in there in terms of like a mentor or something seems like a natural extension.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm happy to work on a plan for AMP on this. It's going to take a bit of time because I have to go see the TSC and do a whole bunch of things. But using that that template here, see what it would look like. And if we can do the same for Mocha and a couple of other projects, and figure out how we want to do the mentorship. I think that, yeah, I think Chris is right. The first thing that we need to do here, if we want to make this concrete, is figuring out the mentorship.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
One issue that I have with the growth as a stage is the question, who does it benefit for us to have itemized requirements for entering the growth stage? Because I can't figure out an answer that would benefit anyone.
So kind of going back to where things started here, it was about looking at allocation of resources. And if there was, for example, if there's a project that needed marketing support, so needs a slice of Rachel's time or needs budget or something like that, when all this stuff was being put together, the idea was, let's figure out how to distinguish the needs of the different stages from each other, as well as the projects which are eligible to claim access to those, for fear of spreading things too thin. So I think that was really the understanding there, was that we wanted to make sure that the projects which say, we need this money, or we need this time, or we need this whatever in order to be able to grow, had met the basic criteria, and had shown that they're on the right path to get to the point of being one of these larger and more complicated projects that has a diverse and healthy ecosystem.
Can we, though? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can we decide whether we want to do the sort of like figuring out the stages discussion, or the how do we have mentors for existing growth project discussion, before like we speak about the two things and come to no conclusion about either?
I'm a fan of focusing on what helps the Chris Hillers of our organization today. And as much as I agree that the way we've come to sort of square the growth tag and that kind of thing is confusing and adding to some friction, I think it is less important than working on solving a real problem for Mr. Hiller than anything else. I would rather kind of learn through that experience of getting them what they need, and allow that to inform, say, the retagging or the rethinking of like stages or statuses or blah, 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 blah.
So we have, I think, 7 projects in the growth stage. I don't know which of those has emitted the desire of actually having a growth plan and moving forward. I know that Chris has. I have to have conversations with AMP about this, but I'm assuming that the TSC would want that too. I know that I think Dylan mentioned last week that intern would probably not, and I don't know about the other projects. So what about we already try to see if we can have, could we have mentors for those, and who would those mentors be, and who, I mean, is anyone actually just even willing to do the mentorship? Because it's like no one is. Like, I don't really know how that's going to work.
I think one of the things is like getting pretty explicit, for some of these projects, like what are those goals? And so let's take, for example, WebHint or actually WebDriver, sorry, because Christian Broman isn't here to tell me otherwise. But taking WebDriver for example, if they say, well, what we really want is to grow in this specific way by demonstrating like broad adoption of the project, and so we want some case studies, okay, well, there's something very specific and tactical that we could then say Rachel Romoff would be, a good mentor for that, because it's a marketing and PR related, versus maybe Mocha wants some other kind of mentorship, and so the different person is more. So to me, it's like not just finding those mentors, but getting specific on what some of those, or even if we're not ready to be, a project isn't necessarily ready to be specific, but like wants a partner to / mentor to like kibitz about what the specific goal should be, like that's useful. But I don't know that we have that even identified for the projects.
So, okay, so the growth stage, the way I understood it is like the growth plan is part of the growth stage. And so if you don't want to do a growth plan, well, then you are rightly reconsidering being in this stage, right? So the projects that want to be in growth and want to do the growth plan need to do the growth plan. And I think then from there we can maybe figure out what kind of mentorship is needed. So if like what you said about WebDriver or whatever, or Mocha, yeah, I mean, that's just going to be on a case by case. I don't feel like we necessarily need to like start assigning mentors right now or anything like that. But I think we do need to get these growth plans. We need to go to the project and say, okay, we're going to expect a growth plan. The idea here is you're going to move to impact. If you don't want to do the growth plan, you don't think you can make it to impact for whatever reason, then we'll move you out of this stage. And otherwise, let's work on a growth plan together. And maybe that's where like a mentor comes in. I mean, again, I feel like that's something that more than one, like you write that growth plan, that I assume that would be something like a PR, and the CPC would need to like okay it. But again, like the growth plan is a means to an end, and that the end is reaching impact stage. So we need to just kind of keep that in mind the way things stand right now. If there's, if we want to go back and change how that works, we can certainly do that. But like the way it works right now is that we need this growth plan, and that growth plan will be necessary in completing the goals, and it'll be sufficient to get to impact stage for the projects that want to get there. So I didn't see your PR, Toby, and I assigned it to myself to look at it, and I want to look at that template.
I just shared right now what the actual template looks like. It's a table in the chat here. I think having a look at that will help make this conversation, even if you just take a minute to look at it now. I think it would make the whole conversation more efficient. It's essentially just copying the requirements that are in the progression document for growth to make sure that we actually meet those, and for impact, right?
Yeah.
And the idea for the plan is essentially you write your current status about where you are for a specific requirement, the desired status of where you want to get to, and that desired status in most cases has to be made concrete through either a discussion with the CPC or a mentor. Because when you say substantial ongoing flow of comments and emerged contributions, like what does that mean? It has to be decided by someone, right? So that's something where I don't think we want the CPC to sit every other week and discuss like specifics like this. And so I think we either have to be more concrete in the document itself, or have someone say, okay, you're a small project, this is what you need. Because for most projects, this is, for most of those requirements, it's not super clear. Some of them are easy, but some of them are like, healthy number of commuters from at least 2 organizations. What does that mean? Like, in the last month, in the last 6 months, 4 year, is that 10%? Is that like 8 people? Like, what are we looking for here? And then once you have these, current status and desired status, you define the plan to move from one to the other, an estimated timeline, and then whether that's done or not. And yes, there should be a pull request in that repository, which is now called project status. Was that the plan in there? At least that's what we had sort of agreed upon.
Looks good to me. Ship it. Let's work
All
with
right.
it.
So let's.
Yeah, and I would like for some of those ones where it's not, like you said, a healthy number of committers, I would just propose what you think is your target.
So that's completely fine. If we write down like the desired status is, if the process is write down what you believe works and then get the CPC to approve it, that works for me totally. And
Right.
we just need to process it. We just need to write it down. That's all we need.
And I think that's what I had always thought. It's like we may not have said like 10 because 10 may not be appropriate, but the project can propose what they think is appropriate in their context, and then the CPC can say, well, you proposed 2 committers, that's really not enough, or they can you proposed 100, and we say, oh yeah, that's great, or whatever whatever looks So I think the proposal to make sense in terms of from the project's perspective, this is what we think makes sense, and then the CPC can weigh in if they agree or not.
I like that. Where can we just write this process down in the plan itself?
It's like, this growth plan template, where is that going?
It's going to turn into at the root of the repository, I imagine.
Okay. I'm almost wondering, like, because you also mentioned we should PR in the growth plans. I wonder if we should have a repo which has the growth plan template. We PR growth plans into there.
Yeah, we can.
And it could have.
Sorry.
And then the README could explain, here's the process. Here we have a template. The project basically fills in the template. We will then have it come to the CPC, and it follows normal consensus making processes or whatever. I forget if there's anything specific written in the governance in terms of approving them, but.
All right, so we put them in project status. I'm going to move it to project status in that case.
Okay, yeah, that works. Yeah, that works for as well.
We put them there. We add a chunk of text in the README for the process of a growth proposal that includes getting it approved by the CPC once it's ready to be approved. And then I guess we have another approval at the end of the process for the move to impact stage, and that's it.
Yep.
All right. I'm just going to write that down here, and we're good to go.
Great.
Right on time to have the private session.
Yes, perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for hashing that out, and thanks, Toby, for taking some notes and moving that bit forward. Thanks, everybody, really. Cool. All right. Well, that's a good place to stop. We have a couple of things to chat privately, so we'll call it quits on the live stream here. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we will see you next week. Cheers. Stopping live stream.